Good afternoon and welcome to Grading for Equity. I think this is our sixth session. We've been together for a little bit. And I just want to remind you of a couple of things. First of all, at the end of this session, I will post the link to feedback. And once you submit your feedback, you will get a message telling you where to download your certificates. I also have, someone told me that last week's session says that it was session 4 when it should have been session 5. So I'll see if I can correct that while you're in your meeting today and post a new link. I'll let you know about that. So thanks for pointing that out. You know, stuff happens. Luckily, most of it can be redone. So I want to thank you all for being here. I think this is an incredibly important topic. This week and next week, we're going to be talking about bias. I bet a lot of us don't even know what kind of bias exists in our grading practices. So I think this is a great topic for us to explore together. And with that, I'm going to turn this over to Melanie and to Stephanie, who will introduce themselves. And thank you both very much for taking this on for us today.
Hi there. So I am Stephanie Hendricks. I teach language arts and humanities at Bangor High School in Bangor, Maine. And I'm also a doctoral student at UMaine, and I'm studying critical whiteness, white teachers in predominantly white spaces who teach texts that use the N-word. So topics related to bias are topics that I am very interested in, and they are definitely my research target. So I'm thrilled to be able to talk about this with you today. Welcome.
I'm Melanie Brown, and I teach in Ellsworth at the Ellsworth Elementary Middle School. I teach 7th grade ELA and social studies. And you kind of remind me, Stephanie, talking about bias. Bias in our historical fiction is very prevalent around certain, talking about certain groups of people, certain races, those kinds of things. But yeah, so I'm very interested in what everyone has to say today, and this is something that rings true with how we're grading. So welcome, everyone.
Welcome. Just a couple of reminders before we begin. I'm sure that we are all 100% clear about Zoom etiquette given the way that we've been teaching this last almost year. But please make sure that you are muted unless you're speaking, and there will be lots of opportunities for participation. We hope that you also have some note-taking materials and your copy of the Grading for Equity book handy throughout the session. You may want to refer to those or jot some things down as we're moving forward. And we want to invite you also to use the chat for any comments and questions. We'll be monitoring that pretty closely. So if there's anything that you want to include in the conversation, or if there's a question, if something's a little bit unclear, just pop right in the chat and let us know about that.
Okay, so looking ahead, that in the chat, if you would put your name, where and what you teach, and what song is on your playlist that energizes you right now. So you can pop that into the chat.
Yay, I'm seeing some great songs in there. Ooh, I'm loving the shout out to Guns N' Roses for Sweet Child of Mine. Um, anything Taylor Swift, don't be embarrassed. Her latest album is really spectacular. I'm seeing Billy Joel and Queen in there. So fun story, my husband programmed our Alexa. So at 9 o'clock on every Saturday, Alexa starts playing Piano Man. Um, They Might Be Giants. Oh, I heart that. There's some really good stuff here. I hope we're going to save this chat and make a playlist. I feel like, Morgan, you were talking earlier about turning all the lights on in your house because, you know, of how dark it is by the time we get done with our day. And I feel like right now we need some revitalization in the days leading up to February vacation, which I know I am looking forward to. I'm sure many of you are as well. There's a lot happening. So I want to give you a quick little preview of some of the things that we're going to be talking about today for chapter 9. I know there are probably some folks who may have sat down and just read the whole book right through. Other folks, it may have been a while since they've read it. And some folks, given how busy and crazy life is, may not have gotten a chance to read it yet. So this is a review or a preview, depending on where you're at. And we're just happy that you're here. We'll take you however we can get you today. So when we're thinking about anti-bias grading and how we can grade for equity, we're really thinking about how to grade students based on the required content of the course and not extra credit. We want to think about how we can grade based on the work itself and the quality of the work that comes in rather than the timing of the work. We also want to think about some alternative or non-grade consequences for cheating or for plagiarism when that happens. And we want to talk too about excluding participation and effort from the grade as well. And we'll talk about some of the biases inherent in grading participation and effort as we make our way through the chapter together.
And so with Pillar 2, talking about bias resistant, it says that grades should be based on valid evidence of a student's content knowledge and not based on evidence that's likely to be corrupted by a teacher's implicit bias or that reflects a student's environment. And really think about what is the child learning, not necessarily how did they get there? Or how long did it take them to get there? Often we'll get into that later. More, I'm getting ahead of myself, so go ahead and change.
So we'd like to keep using the chat and make this as participatory as possible. So we're posing an additional question. So if you've used bonus points or extra credit as part of your classroom practice or grading system, or maybe you're still using it now, we'd love you to use the chat to let us know what sorts of activities you tended to award extra credit for. What kinds of things would you ask students to do to get some bonus points in? And you can throw some of those ideas in the chat. I know as a language arts teacher, I have in the past, I gave students bonus points for completing extra project work, like if they were interested in making a poster that related to something, or if they read an additional book and did a project for that. And so those are things in the past that I awarded bonus points for. I love this, awarding bonus points for the Ninja Turtles. Yep. Did you give extra credit if they knew like that which one was which, like that Raphael was red and they had to know the real deal? Bonus points for bringing chocolate. I see that you're just kidding there, but I wonder if you might be onto something.
Bonus in my classroom.
Yeah, cleaning the classroom. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Yes. Oh, specific understanding and the lyrics of the song, the theme song. I love that. Yep. No extra credit as a rule, but maybe some extra points on long, difficult exams. Yep. So other ways for students to earn points, maybe if things didn't work out, maybe attending events or talks and writing about them, like those extra sort of enrichment opportunities that I think so many of us wish that there was enough budget to bring our students on all the field trips that we wish we could. And so I think that's a practice a lot of teachers would sometimes, award students who went above and beyond to attend some of those things. More peer review, I love that. Completing the harder problems, but not being able to get over 100. Yeah, I don't know about you all, but I remember as a student where I would routinely do all of the bonus points, and so there were classes that I had a grade that was over 100 in. I don't even know like how that worked, but I remember in one particular class my average was consistently 110. Giving extra credit when students begged for it and telling you that only the cool teachers gave extra credit points. Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Yep. So bonus points are a thing that that Feldman really talks about it with regard to this chapter and sort of how important it is that that teachers eliminate bonus points and extra credit from the grade, because he argues on page 114 that extra credit renders a grade inaccurate. And I know that in earlier sessions you were talking about grading and accuracy, and in earlier chapters that's a point that Feldman really spends a lot of time talking about. But a lot of times the activities for bonus points or for extra credit don't necessarily reflect a student's knowledge of the content or what's being specifically covered in the class for standards at that moment. And another point that he makes is that even though extra credit is often optional, and maybe we talk about how it's open to all students, like everybody could take advantage of this, not everybody may be allowed to have equal advantage or equal opportunity to take advantage, because it might require extra resources beyond course requirements. So for example, if students have to attend a session and write about it, they may need to have access to transportation to get them there, which might mean they need access to gas money. Or in this day and age when everything's virtual, like they might need internet access, like reliable internet access. And I know that we've been working hard in COVID pandemic times to make sure that everybody has internet access, because so many of us are educating remotely and in hybrid situations. But there have often been times when I know my students' internet access has been on again, off again, depending on when their parents could pay the bills or when they could kind of re-up their service. And so Feldman makes the point really explicitly. He says that if the work is important, require it, make it part of the actual course grade. And if it's not important, then don't include it as part of the grade. And so that's something that really stuck with me as I was reading this chapter, because I had been a teacher who had offered bonus points and extra credit opportunities in the past. And reading those words and really thinking about the points that Feldman was making had me interrogating my own practice in some powerful ways.
Yeah. So think about this. We're going to put up a poll for you. And think about this. Do you deduct points from students' grades if they turn in work late? If they turn in work late.
Okay, I may have posted the wrong poll question. The two questions I had were about cheating, not about late work. Sorry about that.
Okay.
That's okay. Well, you can throw your answers in the chat. I mean, still answer this poll question. We'll get there eventually. But how many of you have late point penalties? I know some people used to no to penalties for late work. What do other folks have to say? Not anymore.
No deduction.
No deduction. Yep.
I used to. Yep. Works. Yeah. Pandemics definitely changed a lot of how we grade.
Mhm.
I think. No deductions. Penalty. Yep.
So what I'm noticing in the chat, a lot of you are saying no penalty, but I used to. And so that's one of the things that when you get together in your breakout rooms to talk about it, that might be a question to sort of dig into, is what accounted for that change? Like what happened in your practice to make you decide that, okay, I used to do that, but now I'm not going to anymore. And so that might be a question to really dig into when you get to those breakout rooms.
Okay, so what is the alternative to lowering grades for late work? So when students are allowed to have more time to complete assignments, they can work around unpredictable events or overpacked schedules, which even though we're in a pandemic, it still seems like our kids have that schedule. They have less incentive to copy and can take more pride in doing their work. So we'll think about what is the alternative?
Yeah, and it looks like from the chat, so many of you have already sort of had those moments where you've decided not to lower grades for late work anymore. And so I think Feldman would definitely support those decisions. It's something that he advocates for. So now, yeah, there's no escape from the work. It's just the work, and there's no way out of it except to do it. That's a really great point, and I'm glad that you're throwing that in the chat. And that leads us really nicely into our next question. So we had our question, and I'm going to go ahead and share the results. So when students cheat, do they get an automatic 0 for the grade? And so in terms of the folks who answered that question, 70% of folks said never. Oh, here we go. You may have to answer that again.
It's all good.
Sorry, trying to anticipate and be a good support person, I think I totally. So
You're
I will
fine.
launch the polling. If you will all take a moment and respond once again. Shoot. All right, now are we seeing it correct? I'm sorry.
I think we're good. Yes.
All right. Oh, thank goodness.
Perfect.
So Stephanie, if you're able to control this, I'm just going to step aside.
Okay, no worries. I might have to. Okay, hold on. I'm gonna. Okay, yeah. So we have these answers now that are popping up. I'm gonna end that poll and I'm gonna share the results so that everybody can see them on the screen. So a lot of folks are never, that the 0 is never the assignment. You know, and I'm noticing some of the conversation that's going on in the chat, and really thinking about how, you know, Amy, I see you in there, how you've had your hand forced by administration who have made you give a 0 and a detention. I will tell you that we had a situation like that arise at my school last week, and if you're the teacher of record, I'm pretty sure that Maine state statute says that the grade book is yours to control. So there, but there is, I think, sometimes a lot of pressure. I know I can speak at my school. Yeah, not having tenure makes a big difference. And I know at my school, there were folks in my department who pulled together to create a policy about what happened in the case of plagiarism or copying work or whatever. And it was really, when I read the policy, I had to read it with an eye to, am I still going to be allowed to make students do the work? Am I going to be forced to give them a 0 or not? And I felt like, I can't necessarily control what other folks are doing, but as long as the policy is written in such a way that I can still do what I know is right for the students in my room, then I felt like, okay, we can sort of move forward. But I think, if you have policies that are in the student handbook and the teacher handbook, thinking about how, as Feldman argues, you might think about rehabilitative consequences. There's been, I think, so much conversation in education lately about growth mindset and about this idea about how we have to help our students be psychologically safe in the classroom, and we need to help them learn that it's okay to fail and it's okay to take risks. And if we're asking them to do that, then I think, as Feldman argues, we want them to have these opportunities to learn from mistakes, to master the course content. And that means reconsidering the 0 as a punishment for cheating. Feldman goes on to say that the student who cheats should be required to rehabilitate herself by doing the assessment or assignment. And that's what a couple of folks have been throwing into the chat. I saw Angela throw that in earlier, where, you were telling your freshmen that if they didn't complete something, that the consequences, doing the work, and them being really shocked by that. And as Jonathan was mentioning earlier, that there shouldn't be a get out of work card, right? That the idea is to give students the opportunity and the time to practice these skills and really demonstrate their mastery of content. Yeah. I'm just checking that chat, right? So if the work is the goal and access to the work is the right of every kid, then taking the work away betrays the kid and the learning. I think to some extent that might be one way to pose a question and to enter in some of those conversations. If you're in a context like a few of you have thrown into the chat, where there might be policies or there might be practices or there might be procedures in place that sort of require the 0 as a consequence for cheating. I think that's a great question to get folks to maybe start thinking about some of these bigger issues.
And so that brings us to some more chat. Aside from grading and participation and effort, what sort of things do you do in your classroom to encourage students to engage and do their best work? I think this is more important than ever. Boy, I'm seeing so much apathy right now, and among kids, they're just very fatigued with the way things are going. And what sort of things do you support your kids? While you're chatting, I was thinking that maybe when we're in our breakout rooms, it'd be interesting to see how everyone works with people that perhaps are on their team that are very resistant to this way of thinking, this type of mindset. Sometimes people just, they want that, give that 0 and yeah, definitely relationship building. That is so huge. So huge.
Hi.
Hi there.
I think I'm supposed to be in a breakout room, but I'm driving my children home from school. So
Oh, we're not in breakout rooms yet.
Oh,
We'll be heading
God.
there soon.
I am so in.
No worries. It is. I was in my faculty meeting after school today while I was picking both of my kids up from the 2 different schools that they go to. So I totally understand. It is the life that we're living right now. But I love some of these things that are popping up into the chat about frequent feedback to students, individual conferences for students, checking in regularly, how teachers are working. Emily, I see throwing in the chat about making it relevant to their lives and helping them apply it to real life situations.
Empathy, that's another one, and definitely encouraging, keep trying. Feedback, yes.
Yeah.
Nice. Nice. Okay.
And so that question, I think, feeds into Feldman's comments about grading participation and effort, in terms of talking about how, you know, he argues that participation behaviors has no place in a student's grade because it doesn't include valid evidence of content knowledge and is based on criteria that's entirely subjective and is inevitably corrupted by our implicit bias. And so the reason we post that question about all of the things that you all threw into the chat about the things that you do to help your students engage and to help them do their best work, I think the argument that teachers give more often than not about why we grade participation and effort is a very extrinsically motivation centered sort of reason, in that I grade it as a way, or I include it as a grade as a way to encourage students to participate and as a way of encouraging them to engage with the content. So grading participation and engagement becomes a tool to actually help the students get engaged. But we know that in not every context is extrinsic motivation the best way to get students to do things. And based on what we're seeing in the chat, there are so many other more effective things and more supportive things that teachers can be doing to help students engage and to help do their best work than rewarding them with the carrot or the stick of points in their grade. I love the things that we're seeing, like helping students ask questions and sometimes letting the class get off topic. I just finished a book study with a group of teachers where we read Matthew R. Kay's Not Light But Fire, and he talked about the strategy of burning 5 minutes as a way of really building classroom community. And I think that's another way that when students know that we care about them, they are willing to work harder and do their best, sometimes even if they're not 100% interested in what's going on. And Jonathan, I love this reminder that, that whatever assignment they're working on isn't and shouldn't be the center of their world, that as humans, they have lots of other things that they may need to be thinking about and attending to. We know that our students' lives are much more complex and layered sometimes than we're even aware of. And really giving them the opportunity and support when they're with us, and thinking about how sometimes if a student isn't appearing to be engaged or appearing to be participating, that there might be something else going on there, or that even if it doesn't look that way to us. I'm reminded of a conversation I had with a student last semester, and she came up to me very sheepishly after class one day because she had been doodling in her notebook, and she hastened to reassure me. She's like, I hope you don't think I wasn't paying attention. It's just the doodling really helps me focus. And people like Linda Berry, who wrote the book Syllabus and is a creativity teacher, like tell us that doodling and spiraling is a way that does actually help the brain focus. And but obviously this student was so concerned about my perception of her that, you know, that other teachers in her life must have said something to her about, oh, if she's doodling, she's totally not paying attention. And so this idea Feldman brings up about how our implicit biases as teachers of like what a good student looks like, or how a good student behaves, that those ideas that we have and these preconceived notions that we have will impact how we view our students' behaviors, even if we have a checklist or even if we have a rubric. And his argument is that participation and effort just have no part in the grade, again, because they can't really be accurate and because they don't necessarily relate to the content area or to the skills that the course is focusing on.
And so we look at rewarding certain behaviors meant to support student learning, but it forces students to fit within a set of behaviors anchored to the teacher's subjective, implicitly biased idea of what a successful student is. And this is what we were just talking about. And this reminds me of Jonathan's message in the chat. Are the behaviors that their teacher has and values embedded within that teacher-specific culture, upbringing, and learning styles? So I think of our economically disadvantaged kiddos, you know, especially I always use them as my yardstick. And am I doing all that I can for them? The rest will be fine. So.
Margot, I see that question in the chat, like what values might be so different? I think that's a really great question. And so when I think about that question, I think about, for example, how, again, a student who doodles might be perceived as not paying attention when in fact the doodling might help them focus. And so depending on what the teacher's notions are of doodling, that might have something to do with it. I think too, work that's been done recently about introverts and extroverts, I think a lot of teachers put a real premium on getting every student to talk in class and sort of making everybody participate. And I'm married to an introvert, so I try to be really sensitive to this. I call them my sponge students, right? That they soak things in, but they might not necessarily feel like they want to participate in class. But if the teacher has this value or has this belief that, you know, everybody needs to talk, then there might be some students who are made to feel uncomfortable, or who are maybe put on the spot in ways that they might not feel comfortable about. And for those introverts, maybe talking one time in a class period is a big risk and is a lot for them. But if the teacher is like has to participate 3 times in 80 minutes or something like that, which I've actually seen on checklists, and you know, I think that's another time where, you know, a teacher's specific culture or a teacher's way of seeing and perceiving the world can have an impact on students. I think too, Angela, you threw in the chat like a really talky extrovert who might seem like they're engaged, but who might, you know, just be talking to cover up the fact that maybe they haven't done the reading. Other language arts teachers in the room, like I have a feeling that you know the kind of student that we're talking about there. And Jonathan, I think thinking about that question of how our perceptions might have changed, I know that there are some teachers who require their students to turn their cameras on. And if they don't turn their cameras on in a Zoom session, then they don't get participation points. And Melanie, as you were mentioning earlier, I think a number of us, just given the way that our state works, there are a number of students who, for any number of reasons, whether it's socioeconomic status or their family life or whatever, may not feel comfortable turning their cameras on. And so that's maybe another value judgment that a teacher might have, that, ooh, everybody has to have the camera on in order for me to tell that they're engaged, when, I mean, you might be able to use the chat, or you might be able to use the polling feature, or later on, we're going to use Jamboard. There might be other ways for them to show their engagement than having their camera on. So I hope that answers that question about the values that might be a little bit different.
And before you put us out there, I was thinking there was one point about cultural differences too. And if you think about some children coming from a different culture than what we're used to, that, you know, that they may be more introverted, that they won't take on that leadership because that would be perceived as very forward, and that's just not part of who they are. So it's a, I was just kind of, yes, absolutely. The Native Americans, absolutely. They're just taught, some are not taught to do eye contact. You know, they look, and some of us might perceive that as, well, they're rude and they're not making eye contact. Well, that in their culture, that's not okay. And you never make eye contact with adults. So you have to be aware of those differences. So anyways, good stuff. Oh my word. Okay.
I love this. I am so excited by all of the stuff that we have seen in the chat, and I'm hopeful that when we head into breakout rooms, that there will be equally amazing conversations in your small groups. So I am going to throw a link into the chat, because we're going to be using Google Jamboard today as a way of tracking the conversation in the breakout rooms. So I'm throwing that link in the chat. For those of you who haven't used Jamboard, you're gonna love it. It's spectacular. And if you're on the bandwagon with me about how amazing Jamboard is, then hopefully you'll appreciate how we're using it in today's session. So I'm gonna pause my share, and then I'm gonna reopen it to the Jamboard session. And if everyone can click that link and open up Jamboard in a new window, that would be spectacular. Oh no. Well, so friends, this is what happens when you give everybody editing privileges. We had the discussion questions up on that first slide there. And it looks like folks are joining the Jamboard. Here we go. Fantastic. So let's take a look at how this can work. So the discussion questions are up there. I'm seeing lots of folks having a lot of fun in here. So this is really great. So so the way that Jamboard works, I've thrown the discussion questions right up here in our slides, so we can see what those look like and how that works. And then as you move forward in the slides, you'll notice that each breakout room has a grid for you to document your conversations and what you talk about in your breakout rooms. So when you get sent to the breakout rooms, it's going to be important that you pay attention to which breakout room number group you're headed to. And again, for folks who haven't used Jamboard, right up here, you have that, here's our number of slides that we have, and you just use the arrows to navigate to the different pages in the Jamboard. And then when you get to your group number, what we're going to do is invite you to use the sticky note feature or to insert text boxes, either way. So when you add a sticky note, you get to pick what color you want your sticky note to be. My favorite color is green, so I almost always pick that. And then you can type your idea in the sticky note about, you know, what you're thinking or what you're talking about. No zeros for cheating, for example. So there I get my sticky note, and then I can move it around. I can set it at a jaunty angle. I can do all sorts of things with it there. I want to check our chat here. Yeah, so there are the questions. Thanks so much for throwing those questions in the chat. And Morgan, I think we're all set to, I'm going to go ahead and stop the share so that folks can check out the Jamboard on their own screens and then really see the folks who are in their breakout rooms. We want to invite you to turn your cameras on in the breakout rooms too. I think that is going to help us have better conversations, collegial conversations with one another. So when you get to that breakout room, you'll have a chance to do that. And we're going to give you a really sizable amount of time to dig into the content and the questions that were in chapter 9 and that we've asked you to respond to in those breakout rooms. I think there are a lot of big issues to dig into. And I think when we collaborate together, we can engage in some really creative problem solving, because maybe an issue or a problem that I'm dealing with in my school or my classroom is an issue or a problem that somebody else in another school or in another place has solved already.
Okay, sorry, I was just juggling everybody around to make sure I had some good groups. So hopefully everybody is up on the Jamboard and ready to go. And you're gonna have 20 minutes. I think that 20 minutes, because there are 4 different questions, and I'll give you 5-minute warnings to make sure that you're moving on to the next question. Okay, and here you go.
Hi, Morgan.
Hi, Sissy, did you just come in? Let me get you.
Yeah, I just came in and I was wondering, I know this is unsomething. Is there any way I could get put in a breakout room with Helene Adams or Emily Balaban Garber?
Alrighty, let's see if I can find them.
We were just laughing over how after all these times, we've never been in one breakout room together, and we were colleagues formerly.
So Helene or Emily? There we go. I see where Emily is. Okay, I'll put you in that one.
Thanks.
we go. We have returned from our breakout rooms.
All right, fantastic. Welcome back, everyone. Oh my gosh, it's so much fun to watch all of the sticky notes populate on the Jamboard. It is, it's a joy of mine to watch that happen. And I just want to say, so all of you out there in the world who might be Simpsons fans, you have those Homer Simpson moments where you're like, oh, why didn't I think of that? Group number 6. Shout out to group number 6. I heart you. And I had one of those Homer Simpson moments where I'm like, you did a really brilliant thing where you put the questions inside the little grid so that folks could add around that. I'm like, why didn't I think to do that? That was a really like smart thing to do. And so shout out to group 6. And next week, I'm gonna make sure that happens because that was a genius idea. And yeah, I like, it's one of those things, like, I wish it had occurred to me and it didn't, but, so Kara or Kara, I'm apologies. Either way, you're a rock star and I heart you for that.
It was Kara.
Thank you. Great. So I'd love for, some of you in the groups to talk about some of the things that percolated for ideas. I'm happy for you all to also use that Jamboard to scroll through and look at what did the other groups talk about while you were chatting. I really like that it gives you this window into other folks' conversation so you can look for overlaps or you can look for, again, creative solutions to problems that maybe your group had a question that you were wrestling with, but that another group might have answered. So I want to invite folks to raise a question or to raise an issue or to even just report out about what understandings did your group reach or what sorts of things were you talking about? Who's gonna pop in there? Wave a hand at me. I'll make you the spotlight video and then you can join us. Or you can throw something in the chat. Oh, good. Group number 4 and group number 3, they're all on the same board. That's awesome. We were curious about that. And so that solves a mystery. I love that. Thank you. We got taking time to read the Jamboards now. Yeah, there is some really great stuff here. I can go ahead and share screen, and so we can take a look at some of those together if that's a helpful.
I want to throw something out there. Just
go right ahead.
Observer, I didn't participate, but I think that it's interesting. I'm looking at some comments. I think the choice of taking a 0 is making the choice to not do the assignment. And by taking away the 0, you take away the choice to not do the assignment. So there's a cop-out that you remove, by not accepting that particular choice. Hadn't occurred to me to frame it quite like that. I think that's brilliant.
I love that. Let's go back. I'm gonna make this work one more time. Here we go. So yeah, so thinking about some of the ways that maybe folks offered extra credit, or thinking about how important it might be to still teach some of those soft skills. I try to think about, with regard to late work, I try to think about issues of accountability, like how we're accountable to one another in a learning community and what sorts of responsibilities we have to one another so that we can all be equal participants in a co-learning dialogic sort of classroom. And so I think there are still ways to teach those soft skills without being really punitive and without necessarily connecting it to the grade, which I think is one of the points that Feldman is making there. Let's move on and take a look here. Oh my gosh, I love this. We've got annotation happening.
Love it.
You know, we've got other options, really thinking about accepting work until maybe the summative assessment or until a new topic pops up with that late work sort of thing. Addressing habits of work, but maybe not as the part of the grade. A lot of folks, when we asked earlier in the chat, like how do you encourage students to show their effort and participation? And the overwhelming answer was feedback, conferencing, all of that stuff. I feel like effort and participation, like those are things you could address in conversation with students, as opposed to, you know, numerically in a grade, for example. And if that feedback mechanism is part of what you're already doing to ensure that students are engaged and to ensure that students are participating, that's maybe a really interesting way to bring that up. What else? Do we have folks who want to pipe in and speak to any of the sticky notes that you put up there, or to ask a question about how this might work in practice? If there's someone who's really still trying to figure out, like, okay, so I get what Feldman's talking about, but what does this actually look like? How do I make it happen? I think those kind of execution questions can sometimes be thorny issues too. I love the stressing the importance of engagement in the learning, not being able to escape from the work, creating assessments where cheating isn't really an option, like really building in that higher order critical thinking and that independent work ethic. Angela, jump in here. What would you add?
I was going to say that, you know, this came out of our awesome group number 6 discussion. I was thinking about, you know, rather than discussing the consequence for cheating, it does, in fact, just what you started to say, remove the desire or the need or the desperation or frantic panic to cheat if they are not working toward a grade, but if they are in their own journey of learning, and we teach them to reflect and assess and track their own learning. And if we focus on skill and demonstration of what they can do, and we offer supportive feedback, not an A or a B, not the grade. And a couple of us work in a system that's still 0 to 100, A, B, C, D, F scale. And so I know Stephanie and I do, a lot of our other school district partners are evolved to a standards-based, but I don't know if that is like, you know, enough to make students work toward their learning. I'm interested in hearing how people get there. But if we remove that grade as the carrot or the breaking point with parents or punishment or grounding or not getting their car or whatever. I have college prep juniors who, like, if they didn't have A's or B's, the consequence was X. But if we remove those desperate things, and also the timeline, right? If we say, if you're not ready to take this, or if you don't perform well, you can try again later on a different day when you're in a better spot. If they're focused on their whole person and managing and balancing things, that perhaps eliminates that whole quadrant from your little chart.
Yeah, I love that. So in Bangor, we have moved to the 4x4 year and semester. So Monday was the first day of school all over again with a whole new group of students that were just coming in. And so I spent part of that time going over the course expectations and like setting norms, as we tend to do at the beginning of the year with a new group of students. And I was talking about my grading policy, and I was talking about retakes and revision. As a language arts teacher, like, revision is one of the pillars of the writing process, and I really want to encourage students to be able to go back and revise and redo things over and over again. And my students were like, but wait, but really, like, are you sure? And I think Feldman used this as an example, and it may have been in one of the earlier chapters, but it really stuck with me. That was about the driver's license, right? And this idea that, you know, I was lucky enough, I passed my driver's test on the first time. My sister, however, did not, and had to take her test a couple of times before she got her license. But like, that doesn't mean that I get like a super gold star, awesome, fancy license, and she got like a less than license, because eventually we both did what we were supposed to do and demonstrated that we were able to operate a motor vehicle safely on the road. And if that's our goal for students, is like really helping them figure out how they can demonstrate content mastery and demonstrate skill and demonstrate learning, then allowing them to try again when they haven't made it the first time, I think is sort of a necessary part. And to speak to Angela's point, I don't know about a lot of you, but when I've found that when students cheat in my classroom, it's out of fear. It's out of fear and it's out of desperation. Like, it happens because they're maybe afraid that they're not smart enough, that maybe they don't know how to do the assignment, and they're really worried about being able to do well, because like if they don't get my honors kids, if they don't get a 4.0 and they don't get into MIT, then they'll live in a van down by the river, right? Like, they fall down that slippery slope right away. Or I have students who, like, maybe they didn't get back from their soccer game until 10 o'clock at night, or maybe they had to work, or they had to watch siblings, or whatever was happening, and they're just too tired to do the work. And so they end up copying off someone else's paper because they're so afraid of like not doing it and getting the zero, that I think when we can remove the fear from that equation, and when we can let them know that like it's okay to be human, and that we understand, maybe not all the time, but that sometimes life gets in the way, and that we recognize your humanity, then I think, students don't feel that same kind of incentive to cheat or to copy or to plagiarize. And a lot of that, I think somebody mentioned it in the chat earlier, a lot of that comes down to that relationship building, and really thinking about how are we making this a community where kids feel like, students feel like they can learn together, and that it's okay for them to take risks, or it's okay for them to be human, because that's what we all are, right?
So we have it looks like a question from Adrian about hows. I think that's what we're alluding to here. So can we talk about hows? She says she loves them, and she's worked in 2 districts and have tried and failed to use them well. And so from my experience, we've been using habits of work grades separately from outside each content as a separate grade. We had a discussion one year about attaching a house grade to each content area, because often kids will, if they have a really good relationship with the teacher, they'll do much better in that area than they will another area. And it would really give a good picture, clear picture of the kid's day. However, we're just not ready to do that in my district, because it's a lot of work. You have a lot of students if you're, have 50, 60 or more students to do that with. But I'd be, maybe what's going on in your neck of the woods, in your schools.
Yeah, and Jonathan, I want to address your comment in the chat too about this connection between policies and the ability to add or alter grades on a different schedule. I have this conversation with my students too. I don't know how much my colleagues appreciate me letting the cat out of the bag like this, but I disabuse my students very quickly of the notion that their report card grades are carved into stone tablets that I bring down from a mountain, right? I don't know about a lot of other schools and a lot of other contexts, but we have this magical thing called a grade change form. And teachers can put in a grade change form anytime they want. It's like magic. And so this idea that yes, we have deadlines and we have grades and things like in my district, my grades were due for last semester at 8 a.m. on Wednesday. They all had to be in and they all had to be finalized. But here's the thing, like if I had a student come to me and they got their feedback on their final exam essay and they were like, I really want to conference with you about this. I want to try again. I want to do better. And they revised it and they rewrote it. I would be more than happy to put a change of grade form in for them. Just because a grade shows up on a report card doesn't necessarily mean that that record can't change. And yeah, I mean, I think for a lot of people, it does seem like madness. And I don't want to oversimplify that, because I think for teachers, we have a lot of stuff going on, and I think we like having those clear dividing lines and having those clear deadlines, because then kind of we can have closure and we can move on. And I think sometimes, I know at the end of the quarter, because I do accept late work, I can feel a little overwhelmed by like all of the Google Classroom alerts that are popping in. And so like, we're human too. And I think that happens. But I think if we can just be clear with our students that, like, I may have to finalize a grade because of my deadline or my timeline, but I'm happy for you to go back and show me that you have learned more and that you can do better. Like, take that driver's test again and earn your license. Like, do that thing. And I think there's real opportunity there. And I think that's what the learning process is all about, that we're hopefully trying to show our students. And Angela, I think you make a good point too about how some of these, like, however we try to quantify effort and participation, quantifying these really subjective behaviors is a dangerous thing to do, because there's always going to be that bias in there. Because we're human too, and we might, what happens if we caught students on a bad day, or what happens if we never caught a group at the right moment, or whatever. Like, our judgments may not be 100% complete either, even if we do have checklists and tables and charts that we're like putting things in boxes, trying to make sure that we're doing the best we can. Obviously, we know we can't be everywhere and see everything that goes on at once, and I think kind of honoring that as well is really important. I think we might have skipped over this one, and so I just wanted to pop back onto this Jamboard to really think about this idea of helping students understand and having conversation with students, and really thinking about how all of the stuff that Feldman talks about is really about compassion, and it's really about humanity for the students in our classrooms who are other people's children, right?
Building those relationships as well, big time.
Yeah. So I want to come on back to just a little review and a recap, because we're nearing our time together, but I do want to just recap what these big ideas were from chapter 9, this idea of how grades should be based on the required content of the course, not the extra credit. And if there's something that you're tempted to offer extra credit or bonus points for, think about that question, like, why would I want students to do this? What are they going to get out of it? And should I actually add it to my curriculum if it's something that's really worthy? Thinking about how grades should be based on student work rather than the timing of the work. These alternative or non-grade consequences for cheating that really help students learn. And then excluding participation and effort from the grade, because we know how subjective those things can be. So that's our quick recap, and you have all of these slides and everything is available to you. In the couple of minutes that we have left, I just want to make sure that if you have something really burning that you want to add to the conversation, or a question that you haven't gotten in there yet, that you have this opportunity to add to the conversation, to let your voice be heard, either by unmuting it and popping in, or by popping something into the chat.
Can I say something?
Absolutely. Yeah, jump right in.
So I will say that I think of all the chapters so far, this one has really given me some pause, but also some reinvigoration of my feeling like, okay, I've made some progress, and I am doing some of these things, and I don't know, I really enjoyed this chapter of all the ones so far that I've read, and felt like there was some really clear to-dos and things you could have really real concrete conversation with in and out of your content colleagues. So thanks for that.
Thank you. These chapters, this book was life-changing for me. Like, I felt like, I felt like I had been doing a pretty good job. And then I read this book and I was like, ooh, okay,
Yeah.
I could be doing a better job. Let's make this happen. And so if you were in that same boat, yeah, I was right there with you this summer, and it really, like, it revolutionized what I do in my classroom, I think, in some really, really powerful ways. So thank you for that very much. I noticed that Morgan threw in the chat just a couple of things we want to call your attention to. So we created a study guide for chapter 10 as well. I hope that you found those a little bit helpful. Or if you didn't look at it for chapter 9, maybe check it out for chapter 10. There are some pre-reading questions and some during reading questions in there. And we highlighted what the key points to that particular chapter are. So next week, we're going to continue talking about this idea of trying to rid our grades from bias. And Margot, you asked where you find the study guides. So Morgan just threw that link in the chat again. If you click on the link, it should pop right up for you. Yeah. Yeah, and Mary, I see your question, and I think it's.
I know that everyone sees it too. I am mindful of that. And, we started with 99 and now we're down to this. And I love this group. I love what I'm learning. It's inspiring me, but there's about 50 people who aren't with us anymore. And I wonder how we can embrace folks who might not be exactly on the same page so that they feel they can stay and continue to be challenged, but, circle the wagon, how far ahead, I don't know. That's just what I'm thinking.
So I would like to point out that one of the things that I track on our YouTube channel is how many views the sessions get.
Oh, that's good.
So previous sessions are getting viewed. And remember, I collect feedback. People want to get the contact hours. So they are indicating that they are watching these sessions in review. I'm also getting some people reaching out because they want to start this study in their own districts.
Yay.
So it's really is. We've called this all along a grassroots movement. And what we need to do is keep pushing it forward. So my plan is we have 3 more sessions to finish the text study, 1 more with this bias pillar, and then 2 about motivation. And then after that, and I think this may be taking us all the way into April, then what I'd like to do is have us reflect on how we move this forward as a grassroots movement to keep getting, and I will tell you, the original group that did this presented to the commissioner last August, and she was completely on board and encouraged us to keep going, keep reaching, keep working on it.
Yay.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things I've learned through leading other book groups and other professional development where I've seen some of the same attrition is that the folks who are here tonight, I have to tell you, friends, the chat was so engaged and on topic. The Jamboard is packed with ideas. Like, even if you're feeling like in your building or in your context that you might be kind of going it alone, and that you might be sort of the only one who's really taking the risk and trying this out, know that you're not alone. Like there are 26 other people who are here with you today, not even counting the folks who are going to watch on the replay. And I think that like Morgan was saying about a grassroots network, right? We can reach out and we can support each other across buildings, across districts, across contexts, so that we know that, you know, we can control the things that we can control, but we also know that like it's not just us, like that we are part of this bigger community who's really committed to change. So thank you so much, and I look forward to continuing this conversation next week. Yay.
Absolutely. All right, folks, I will send you the link to the recording and a reminder about the feedback. Please do complete the feedback even if you're not collecting the certificates. And I'll remind you about the study guide for the next chapter. And I'm gonna absolutely must thank Stephanie and Melanie for a very lively session. That was lots of fun. Great job, and I look forward to seeing all of you next Thursday.
Thanks, everyone.